The Jews celebrated their Yom Kippur recently, the Day of Atonement. Atonement is an interesting word. So there are three levels, depending on how you split it up and pronounce it. The lowest level is atonement, and that's the level for the ego that feels remorse for its sins, and in the Jewish tradition, spends the day fasting and asking forgiveness and reciting a number of prayers to that effect. But what is the real sin to atone for? Isn't it falling away from God itself? And isn't that what the ego is? But can the ego atone for being an ego? It can't ever get to that level. It can atone for the minor sins that the ego does, or even major ones in a relative fashion, but it can't get rid of the fact that it is the source of those, let's say, episodes of bad karma. It can't change it. It doesn't have that power, and so that's why there's prayer to God, because one feels helpless in the commission of, or omission of, accurate behavior and commission of inaccurate. So there's a higher level, which is that of attunement, but the attunement must come at the soul level. Only the soul can attune to God. The ego can pray and can beg for mercy and can do particular acts of austerities for limited periods, but it can't eliminate its paranoia, its aggressivity, its greed, its lust, its fear, its anxiety. It has no power to let those go. So they remain, and they are the cause of further reasons to have to atone again the next year, but it doesn't really accomplish elevation. Whereas attunement to the vibrational frequency of God, that will bring elevation of consciousness to the level that you are resonating with, if you can reach the vibrational frequency of the Supreme Self. If you can do that, then you'll rise to the top level of at-one-ment. That's the nature of the self. That's non-duality. The self is the oneness of all that is. There is no second, no other. And it is that realization that everything is the one consciousness and a manifestation of the one intelligence that is functioning as a multiplicity, but the underlying agency is not within the matrix of the multiplicity. It's actually the dreamer of that dream, that power that is present but hidden, at least hidden to the ego, and only glimpsed by the soul, but that is in fact everywhere, and everything, and all that could possibly be, whether in the subtle realms and the dimensions that do not appear, as well as in that which appears and disappears. So the state we want to be in is at-one-ment. The lower two are only, let's say, interim measures that we use to try to get to the true nature of our being. But we are already that at-one-ment. We don't really need to get there. It's an illusion that we're the ego. So the atonement actually affirms the illusion, because then you believe you are the sinner that must atone. But that is the illusion that must be given up. you see? And that illusion is the source of the jouissance, the enjoyment of sin and suffering and the illusion that the consciousness has become addicted to. And because of that addiction, has lost its free will to rise into its higher levels of its own real nature. And because the ego is obsessed with the petty concerns and the manipulations of its local space situation, and it wants control and power, and it wants everything to work out the way it wants, or it's frustrated and angry and upset, and it's always in emotional volatility, it's never at peace internally. And because it's not at peace, it can't meditate, and it can't get out of the situation that it itself is causing by its emotional reactions and projections and introjections that are disturbing it. But it can't get out of it because it doesn't have a margin of peace from which to say, no more, I'm done. And one has to reach that point where one is literally done with the ego. It is of no further use, and there must be a conscious realization. It's obsolete, it doesn't serve, it's a waste of your time, and it's not intelligent enough to know how to navigate life without creating more pain and suffering for itself and for others. So this is right now, I would say, an urgent necessity to get out of that lowest level, which can be very self-righteous. The people who go to the synagogue and atone, I'm sure, feel very good about themselves, especially if they paid a lot of money for their seat and, you know, all of that, which apparently, you know, is going up as an inflation of spiritual absolution in the world. So the situation is that that self-righteousness keeps one feeling like one is where one should be in the lowest level. But at that lowest level, of course, those sins, the demonic nature of the shadow that infiltrates into the ego and influences it to commit more sins and crimes and misdemeanors and all of that, is in charge of one's consciousness. One has given up one's power, one's real power, to those impulses and drives and intentions of an agency that is not oneself. And so there's a foreign thought form functioning as the usurper of your body, your mind, your emotions, and running your life. And it's that has to be removed. That's the virus that has to be eliminated. And if we don't do that, we're going down the drain very quickly. Because that virus is now literally creating a pandemic, not the one that's talked about out there, but the one that's causing the one that's talked about out there, and that has turned the world into a war zone in which there's already mass death, although it's not reported very accurately in the mainstream news, but it's happening.